I am so excited to welcome our guest this time on Lessons from Last Time, Stu Sandor. Dude, thank you for coming in.
I'm happy to be here. It's good to, get out of our little bubble in Lake Oswego and come over to the thriving metropolis of Vancouver.
It is thriving, man. It's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's come into its own over the last few years.
You can use the word thriving now. I think it's an apt word, especially go down to the waterfront. So.
Yeah. Stu, I got to tell you, when I had not known you, I had just known of you in the business. And it was always so funny because when I was going somewhere, I would hear somebody go, Stuart Sandor is going to be there. And I'd be like, who is this Stuart Sandor guy? You've had a big name in the Portland market for a really long time. And so I was kind of nervous when I first met you. I'm like, this is the Stuart Sandor. And since then, we're just buddies.
Right.
But you've developed quite a reputation in the market.
Well, it didn't come easy. It was, I guess, years of practice. This is my 30th year doing this. So some of it has been because that name maybe has been around for a while. And as you can tell by the gray hair, it's taken its toll, right?
It's salt and pepper.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
A little bit. But it's been a fun ride for sure. And you meet a lot of great people along the way. I ran into some friends from, the early days of when I first started not long ago. And they're like, where is, so-and-so? And they're bringing up old names like, wow, I've heard that name for forever. I was at a football game the other day and sitting next to my sister, who has different last name, of course, and her son plays for the high school I went to. And turns out we were sitting next to an old classmate, but he had a beard and, he was bald. And so I didn't even recognize him until he said his last name and and said first and last name. He goes, oh my God, Stu? And I said, yes. He was, beside me, so he couldn't really look out and see. But it's funny, this is a small town and the circles come full circle quite often, whether it's from work or school or just old friendships.
Yeah. Well, I know you're a college football fan. You're a big Husky fan, from what I understand. Did I get that right, Kurt?
Thanks for getting that in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I did apply there, but I didn't have the grades to get in. So they have high standards.
Nice.
Yeah, they knew better.
I didn't have the football prowess to get in, so I wasn't able to play there. So I met Stuart back in the early days for me, which was the First Horizon days, when I got promoted to a position over Lake Oswego as the regional for Oregon, or district manager for Oregon for First Horizon, which I thought was such a cool company, back in the day, and had some really amazing products. Stu was our top producer down there, and we got to know each other. And but let's go backwards from there, Stuart. I want to get into origin story because yours is kind of fascinating. Not only everybody's story and how they got in the business is usually kind of interesting, but yours is not only interesting, but it's so directly contributory to your success in the business because of the background you brought to the business. So let's talk a little bit about that origin story.
Yeah, I went about things totally differently than most people. And when I was in 8th grade, we're going to go way back here. When I was in 8th grade, I had a girlfriend that mom didn't like. And she said, no way are you sticking with that girl. Mark my words, she'll drop out of high school and be pregnant by her freshman year.
Oh, boy.
So they sent me away to an all-boys Catholic high school in Portland called Jesuit. And it was like 20 minutes from I grew up in Newburgh, which is wine country today. Back then it was kind of farm country, so it wasn't
A lot more banjos back then.
yeah, and it's just different. And so here I go to Jesuit, where a lot of people from Raleigh Hills and Portland and the West Hills went, and I was a misfit. I was a country boy who learned to drive a tractor at age 11. That comes to this high school. And I was not, today I stand 6'2" and 200 pounds. Well, I was a beanpole back in high school. And so to keep from getting beat up, I thought, well, I'll use humor and I'll make friends with all these bigger guys that are on the football team. And if I make them laugh, then they won't, slam me into the lockers.
Right.
So I started doing that. Well, the class clown in me started coming out, and it, like anything, if you are good at it, you get rewarded, you get claps and applause and laughter, so you keep doing it. Well, my junior year, I was probably not paying attention in English class, and Sister Mary Kay was the English teacher. And she was super strict. I mean, she probably had a ruler. She would slap your hand. And back then at Jesuit, it was all boys. So you could throw a teacher could throw a book at you if you weren't paying attention. And they did. And they would, yell at you and things that you can't do in schools these days. So I was talking to a guy behind me and she said, Stuart Sandor, use pilfer in a sentence. And we had to learn vocabulary words all the time. And we learned 5 a day. So by the end of the week, you had 25. Well, that started on day 1. And then the next week, another 5. And so by the end of the second week, there's 50. So you had to learn all these words. And this was a new one that we hadn't learned yet.
She hit you with pilfer.
Pilfer. And which, if you know what it means to steal. And I maybe thought that, but I just like that, I said, the girl took a pill for her headache. And the room erupted at the wittiness of it. And she kind of chuckled and she goes, very clever. Go see Mr. Gedros. That was the principal. Oh, no. So I got sent out of the room, which of course got more laughter because everybody was like, ha ha, you got in trouble. And first it was, ha ha, I can't believe you said that to her. Right. But then it was, oh, now you're getting in trouble. She goes, go tell him that story and if he thinks it's funny. Oh, no. So I did. He did think it was funny.
When?
He goes, that's pretty clever. Perhaps we could come up with a more productive way for you to use your wit. And so at the end of every week at Jesuit, they had these announcements on the loudspeaker. And they would just read, tonight, the football team's playing Beaverton at 6 o'clock, be at Cronin Field, da-da-da-da. They were kind of boring and someone just read them. He goes, your assignment, extra credit, is to come up with the announcements for this Friday's game and whatnot. And I said, okay. So I did, but I took it upon myself to make it more fun and creative and made kind of a skit. And people absolutely, and so they had me read it. They proofed it and had me read it.
They proved it, of course.
And people loved it. So then they had me do it again next week. And it would take like TV shows or something. And like we had a teacher named Father Robinson. And so we made Father Robinson's Neighborhood instead of Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, right? Or instead of Mr. Rogers. And we put words and scripts and I did the voices of Father Robinson. And pretty soon he became a celebrity and people thought this is the greatest thing. So from that, I decided, maybe advertising and writing is a good thing for me. So when I went off to college, that's what I did. I studied advertising through the journalism school. And the whole time, did an internship with an ad agency and graduated. And the first day started working for an ad agency. Well, what I didn't know was in advertising, they don't pay you squat.
Unless you own the building.
Unless you own the agency.
Yep.
So I had thought I was going to make all this money. I had friends that were making $40,000, $50,000 a year. And so I went and bought my senior year a new Acura.
Your senior year in college?
Senior year in college.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Traded in this little 𝗁𝗵𝗲 I had that kept breaking down. It was an old Subaru, and I just hated it. And I'm like, I'm graduating soon. They had a recent college graduate program, and I get this $12,000 Acura that was $267.10 a month. Uh-huh. And so I go to get this job, and they're like, well, here's your job offer. And I'm like, is that a month? Uh-huh. It was $1,000 a month. And so now, but $1,000 a month really translates into about $700 a month.
What year is this?
1990.
Okay.
Yeah. So needless to say, I was living at home for a while, with my Acura. And so
better than in your Acura.
Yes. But they would let you do freelancing. And so I started doing work for a bookstore and anybody else that couldn't afford to pay the agencies $150 an hour. I would do it for $50 to $75 an hour and supplement your income. And as long as you did it after hours or on weekends, totally fair game. Well, I run into a friend of mine who's probably still in the mortgage business today, a guy named Mike Ellsworth from high school. And he's working at 24-Hour Fitness as a trainer. And I went there to go work out, and we run into each other. And I'm like, you're doing this full time? He goes, no, I work for a mortgage company. I'm like, mortgage? What's that? Hadn't bought a house yet, so I didn't know. And he starts telling me, and he goes, dude, maybe you can help me. Rates are great. They just went from 12% to 10%. And I feel like there's a lot of business out there, but I'm not getting any business. Well, Mike, maybe I can help you do some ads. So I did. And it was back back when the Oregonian was pretty big, and people were taking out half-page ads in the Oregonian. But the problem with most ads is they would put way too much words and graphics and stuff that you'd be like, ugh, it looks too complicated. I'm not reading that. Well, I made a little ad like this that had maybe 4 or 5 words on it, and I think it said something like, if your rate's higher than this number, call this number, and had his phone number. Well, his phone was ringing off the hook. And pretty soon he's their top guy, thanks to the advertising that, his ad guy that he paid me $50 to make. Well, the owner hears about it and he's like, I want your ad guy to do our ads. So I started doing their company's ads. And one thing led to another. Well, then he's trying to get me to leave my job and go work for them. And I'm like, well, you guys are all commission, right? He goes, yep, all commission. I'm like, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with my $3,000 a month that I'm making now, because it's about the third year in the agency. Well, I had another freelance client who you may have heard of, Kevin Duckworth, played for the Blazers.
Oh my gosh.
He had a side hustle and I was doing his stuff. Well, I'm 20 something years old. He's 20 something years old and he's 7 feet tall, 400 and some pounds. And you couldn't miss him when he came into the office.
He is hard to miss. He was hard to miss, yeah.
And so he would come in and drop off tickets for the game. And then, here's my next project. And we talk about it for a minute. And I'd be like, Kevin, you got to go. You're going to get me in trouble. We aren't supposed to freelance during the day. And sure enough, okay, he'd leave. Well, then he'd come back another day and he'd want to sit and rap for half an hour. Well, it's like hard to tell him to leave. This guy, that pseudo celebrity, yeah. I'm starstruck. And anyway, long story short, he did it one too many times. They fired me.
Wow.
Yeah, for freelancing. Now, of course, I'm working 12-hour days, working weekends and all that. So in my mind, I was pissed because I work more than the 40 hours a week. But, in their defense, it wasn't okay during the day. So it was the best thing and it was the worst thing. So now I had nothing to lose. So the guy that kept trying to hire me, I said, all right, let's do this. And did an internship with Mike and one other guy at this little company and learned for a month. And then the next month they turned me loose to go start getting business.
Go get 'em, Tiger.
Yeah.
What I love about this story, you don't know this maybe, is that I heard this story almost in its entirety and pretty close to exactly the way you described it from Mike Ellsworth, who I used to work with a few years ago. Still a loan officer out in Hood River,
Yep.
doing great, and still exactly how you described him earlier. Still loves the kiteboard and still loves to do loans and does a
Yeah.
great job out in that wonderful market of Hood River. But he told that story almost to a T.
Yeah, and they put everybody in a room about the size of this, and there was 6 of us in there, and we called it the Bat Cave because everybody else was in a big giant open room with cubes. We were in the only room that we actually had. We had a bat phone. We had a separate phone wired that we would put our ads to, and it would ring separate from the phone system that you'd pick up and Stu line 13, whatever. This one, when we knew when that phone rang, it meant business. And so sitting in there, I would listen to all these other guys that were super financial. And I'm like, you guys, you're talking over people's heads. They kept using words like LTV and DTI. And as a new guy, I'm like, people don't know what those words mean. Why don't you just talk to them in regular language? And that's what I did. And people seemed to appreciate it. Then the other thing I noticed that people didn't do that I did right away is I came from the ad world where if we had a lawn and garden client that wanted to do a direct mail campaign, we would like, well, where's your database? We don't have one. And so we would buy one for them. And we would spend thousands of dollars to get a list of people that might be interested in buying a weed eater or a lawnmower. And so everybody that called to me was somebody that was somewhat interested in a mortgage, and I would save their information. Nobody else was doing that. If you didn't push go right away with any of these other guys in the office, they would discard it and wait for the next call or call someone else. And I saved it. And then if, a 10% rate didn't do it for them when rates dropped to 9 and I called them back, that would move the needle. And so there would be thanks so much for keeping in touch because you're calling with something of value. Hey, we talked when rates are 10, here's your savings. Now they're 9. And does that work better for you? Oh my gosh, now it's $300 a month. Yes, let's do this. And so that was it. There was no email back then, so it was just name, address, phone number, and then I would send out little mailers, which that's probably been the key to my success was keeping in touch with people and then doing it in a creative way, which most people, from a mortgage person, they never hear from again. They don't even get a thank you note. And I still do handwritten thank you notes to this day. And, back in the heyday when we were closing 40, 50, 60 loans a month, that's a lot of thank you notes that you'd be doing every day. You'd be doing thank you notes. Well, these days it doesn't take quite as long. But I wish we had more. Yeah.
So I remember, Stuart, meeting you back then and working with you and coming out to your office there in Lake Oswego, right across from what used to be the Oswego Grill. I can't remember what it was back then. Probably Chili's.
It was Chili's. Yeah.
Chili's, yeah. And you're working on a piece that you were sending out to your database, and you were frustrated with whoever printed it because they messed up the border. And I remember asking you why, and you said, because the border is consistent in everything I do, because I want, when they get something from me, I want them to feel that it's Stuart Sandor without them having to read a thing. It needs to feel and look like everything I do. And it was amazing to me how that background in advertising and marketing was so significant to your success, because you get it. You understood that the message you put forward has to be consistent and it has to resonate you.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. I mean, the lessons learned from
that. Yeah, I think that just goes to credibility. If your website looks the same as your business card and the fonts are the same, the logo's the same, your title. I've seen, I remember, looking when I was proofing ads, I would physically call the phone numbers that people would put in the ads to make sure it rang to the right place. I can't tell you the number of times that people would get a phone number on a postcard or something, and it would ring to some back office that nobody would answer. I'm like, why are we using this number? And, we want to test the calls. Who's going to answer those calls, right? And so all those things have always been really important. It's the details that matter. It's the same thing when you go to a Street of Dreams house, and it's the under cabinet lighting. It's the fact that all the grout is so perfect in the tile in the shower, or that the glass door is oversized. Little details like that. Sometimes people can't tell you or put their finger on what makes quality, but they know it when they see it. And it's the same thing in advertising. It's so subtle. We were just trained, for the 4 years in college, and then actually doing it at this little ad agency, that it's the little things that matter. And people get weird feelings just subconsciously about who they can trust. And what more important of a thing is there in mortgages than trust? Because you're putting forth your whole financial picture to someone, and you want to make sure they're going to do it right. And so for me, reputation was super important, and to the extent that there were people, and back in the heyday, there would be these ski bus trips up to the mountain with a lender, and some people would get just absolutely drunk and just make a fool of themselves, and it was in front of other mortgage people, but that sort of tarnished their reputation, because someone say, "Oh, I used to think a lot of that person, but boy, you should have seen him last weekend." Or there were pictures, and there wasn't cell phone cameras like there is today, or video. But I can imagine if some of those things had been around during those times. And to me, it was like, you just didn't do that. And I would see people in bars, just doing stuff like, not that I want to be a stick in the mud. I'll go out of town and have that kind of fun, but not here where it could hurt your reputation. Because that was everything. So, and reputation, it came right down to, what you put forth to market yourself with. It had to be spot on and accurate. Surprisingly, compliance wasn't as big of a deal back then. So there were no compliance departments. You probably didn't even start this company till way later when that became a thing. But as long as you had like APR and phone numbers and address, some basic advertising requirements, you were fine to send it out, and someone would check it and make sure at the company, and it had just the litmus test to make sure it wasn't completely misleading, but had some reasons for a call to action.
I'll tell you, I love the attention to detail. There's Gabriel Iglesias is coming this weekend, and my son and I are going on Saturday. And the radio right now on 620 Sports Radio, it says Sunday, November 4th, Gabriel Iglesias. And I went, "Oh, it's on Sunday?" And I freaked out, and I called my wife. I'm like, "I guess I'm going with Tate on Sunday." And she goes, "Well, that's really weird because you had said Saturday." So now I'm getting in an argument with my wife because I put it the wrong day on the calendar. And then I heard it again, and I'm like, wait. And I looked at my calendar. Somebody didn't check to make sure that they looked to see if the day and the date matched. And it's a huge deal. My question for you is, most people who are artists and have artist brains, attention to detail, focused on the visuals of things, the reputations of things, don't have math brains or the ability to do the business side of the world, their creative or their business. I always say a unicorn can do more than anybody else. You've got both.
Math is probably the only subject that I got A's in high school, and the rest, average. We kind of joked about the University of Washington. I applied to a University of Washington coming out of high school with a 3.14 wasn't good enough. And so math was the only thing that I was consistently good at. And the reason for me, I think, is because you can check your work. If you're doing addition, you can subtract it and get the number back and proof it. And, if you're multiplying, you could divide and go backwards and get the real answer. But you're right. Working at the ad agency, there were the creative types that would design stuff and the copywriters. Like, I would mostly write all the copy and then give it to a graphic designer. Well, the graphic designers were typically the worst spellers. They would make huge typos that are blatant right in front of you. Like, do you see that you spelled that with a T-A-H-T? I mean, like dyslexia kind of stuff. And they wouldn't catch it, but it would look beautiful if you just stood back and looked at it graphically. It would look beautiful. I'm like, okay, now let's go and correct all the words and the periods that are in the wrong places. And there's these things we learned about called widows in typesetting. And that is, if you have a sentence and the last word might be the number 1, O-N-E, period. Well, you didn't want that word to be on its own separate line on the next line. So you would squeeze the type so it would fit on the one line. Otherwise, you had to read and do a return and then go back and read that one word. So there was a point where one word was a no-no. You made it fit, or you edited a word so you could get things out. Those are the kind of little details that we were trained on, and these graphic people were really good at from a visual standpoint. They just weren't good at from a writing or proofing standpoint. But somehow I got a little bit of both, enough. I can't draw worth a lick, but I can lay something out. And I think it's more about spatial dexterity. So in other words, if your wife is really good with picking color, but she crowds a room or a shelf with too many things on it, there are certain people that can come through and organize a shelf to where it looks more pleasing to the eye. And that's the spatial part of it. And it's the same thing in laying out, which I would use in the marketing postcards that I would send probably every other month to my database. As that grew, I would, send out. First, I started doing letters and I would hand sign them. Well, when I got to about 100, that was a lot of signatures, a lot of licking envelopes, a lot of stamps. And I thought, well, I'll start using postcards because they're cheaper to mail, they're smaller. And guess what? If you're receiving it, you don't have to open the envelope, open the letter, read it. The chances of you at least making an impression with the postcard
goes up dramatically.
You pull it out of the mailbox. You might say this is garbage, but I got you because you made an impression before you threw it in the recycling bin. And so I switched from postcards pretty early from letters on an early stage, and they were more cost effective and
bulk metered and all that fun stuff.
Could do all of that.
You also, so you took this great background in marketing and advertising and consistency and form and all that stuff, but you also expanded into some really unique events that you would do that have kind of become signature events for Stuart Sandor in your marketplace. Come drive a luxury car, come get your pet groomed.
Yeah.
Describe some of the inspiration behind those ideas.
Well, one of the jobs I had at the ad agency was to come up with events for shopping centers or things to get people to come to the location. And I thought, well, we could do that with a mortgage company, because what better way to show that we're legit than have people walk through our doors and see that, we don't have paper laying all over. And so you don't have to worry about your tax return sitting out on a desk, because again, to build that trust and that we're super professional. And so I would try to think of ways to get people to come. And I was always a car guy from a young age, even if, I had a Volkswagen, it was a nice Volkswagen, and it was clean and it was fixed up in ways that I could do it. And as we, started in this and earning a little bit more money, you would go out and look at nicer cars. So I thought, well, what if we brought in some cars that people wanted to drive? And so I would partner with these dealerships and say, let's get some exposure for your lot. And at the same time, we'll make it a win-win for us. We'll promote it. We'll promote you. You bring the cars, let people take test drives from our office. And they loved it. And it was like unheard of. Nobody was ever doing anything like that where you had nothing to do with home loans, but it was just about connecting with people that, on a different level. Because let's face it, people want to do business with they know, like, and trust. And if they share a passion with you, then that helps them like you and then maybe earn your trust too. So that was one thing. People love dogs. In fact, I have a dog now, a new puppy, and every time we turn on the TV, like every other commercial has a dog or a cat in it these days. And our dog, for whatever reason, just goes nuts when he sees a dog on the TV because he barks and wants to, chase it or get it. This is my turf. And it's such a common thing that people have pets. Most households have pets. So it was one of those things that people that are passionate, if they own homes, they probably have a pet. So we had a pet grooming event that we would, make it a benefit for the Humane Society. Mm-hmm. So instead of paying to get your, cat or your dog groomed for $50, donate it to the Humane Society, and then we'll entertain you while the dog was getting groomed. We had 3 mobile detailer trucks going outside, so they were churning the dog grooming and giving a bath and stuff. And again, people loved it because they got to bring their dog, and it's like family. Pets are family.
Practical and purposeful because it contributes to it's cause marketing because you're contributing to the Humane Society and you're servicing an important.
Yeah, and that was one thing I guess I learned at an early age. It's one thing to throw a party, but you could look pompous if you threw a party and it was just glamour and glitz. But if you threw a party for a good cause, I used to collect toothpaste and like mouthwash and shampoo and soap. I did a trip to Guatemala, which I know hits near and dear to your heart, through Medical Teams International. And it was something my wife and my son and I all did. It was probably 10 years ago. But, here were these people that were in a house, if you want to call it that, with one light bulb and no running water. And if what we were doing was building stoves in their house just out of cinder blocks and different things, and made it so that the smoke wouldn't fill up the house, which was bad for their lungs and hurting these guys' longevity. So we made a chimney that would go outside, and we taught them how to do it. Well, they were so grateful. They would mostly eat like tomatoes and vegetables that they grew right there. And occasionally they would have a chicken, and they would chop up the chicken and put it in these tacos. But it was very rare that they would have meat. Well, they would give you the taco with the chicken in it. That's how grateful they were. And it's like you felt guilty taking it because you knew that they didn't have much. I mean, there was dirt floors and spiders on the floors and stuff. But they didn't have toothpaste or anything like that. And we thought, how could we collect that at events and then ship it back to them? So I started doing it where every time you go to a hotel, you'll see extra soaps in the bathroom or extra soap in the shower. Well, just grab them and throw it in your suitcase. And I got people to start doing that. And then we would pile it up in a big bin and give it to medical teams who would take it over. And that was like the most popular thing. They could bring toys and things, and the people are like, oh, cool, a doll. But they really cared about was the toothpaste and the stuff for their own health. Because if they have $3, they're buying food. They're not necessarily buying conditioner or lotion for their hands after they get done work in the fields. And so those things went really far, and people felt good about bringing. They didn't know the impact because they hadn't seen it like we had, but we would tell them how much this really meant. So doing things like that, I've always from then partnered with like the Sunshine Division for food and different things like that. So just try to pay it forward. To do something good for others.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com, definitely join Coop Plus. let's get back to the podcast.
Well, listen, brand building has been a huge part of your success. Those of us who know you know that. So let's talk a little bit about, in fact, I think you've got some show and tell to share with us about how you've gone about being creative and building the Stuart Sandor brand in this mortgage space.
I did. I dug through a filing cabinet I had at home that I actually keep paper in, of all things, not digital, because 30 years goes back to before that. And one of the very first pieces that I did that got people's attention was, and you guys might remember this.
I remember this. I'm looking at it going, I saw that
But
piece.
it was how to spot a good mortgage guy. And it has a picture of me, and it has all these little lines drawn to, for instance, this is me holding a bottle of wine. It says sometimes whining works, watch set fast to prevent missed deadlines. I've got like a bionic ear, so it shows that I've demonstrated good listening skills. And this was inspired by a poster I had as a kid that said, "Are you a nerd?" And it had, things pointing to like your pocket protector,
yep.
and the watch with the calculator built onto it. And I thought, there was a typical loan officer look, when I first started. They were wearing the suit, maybe they drove a flashy car or whatever, but not everybody had to conform to that. So if you wanted to be outside the box, that was that. So this was one that I did that people thought was pretty clever and fun. Lately, it's been trying to take like a funny a spin on a movie, and so here's James Bond look-alike, and instead of a gun, he's holding a calculator.
Yep.
HP, I hope.
It is on HP, and then it's got some different quotes in here, like Stuart's word is his bond, and that's by Dr. No. I got pre-approved within 007 minutes from Miss Moneypenny and
nice.
Things like that. So got a couple of those. This was another one. One of the rare skills I have is I can actually ride a unicycle, and so we had a photographer take a picture. And then there's me juggling a bunch of different balls, and so the headline, or play on words, was kind of my specialty. Was, can your mortgage guy juggle more than one type of loan? Because some people were really good at 30-year fixed, and then there was ARMs and different
and that 30-year
things.
fixed is 6%, so that was a better time.
In those days, it was 6%. This was, I think, 2004, but
that felt low back then.
Yeah, that was a pretty good rate back then. So we've got a few of these. This was.
I remember this one as well.
This was I helped a cartoonist buy a house, and along the way he started doodling, and I'm like, "What are you drawing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm just sketching you." And I'm like, "Well, could you make the arms a little bigger?" And so he kind of sketches it out, and then we came up with the Amazing Mortgage Guy deal.
Oh my gosh!
And I sent this postcard out, and kind of a fun play on words. It was. Stuart Sandor was born an ordinary citizen in Edinburgh, Scotland, until one day, while testing a calculator battery with his tongue, a freak accident occurred, transforming him into the Amazing Mortgage Guy.
Oh my gosh!
And this, to this day, I have a black and white version of these, and we hand them out at Halloween for kids to trick or treat and color. And so we'll have like coloring contests for.
Wow.
For the Amazing Mortgage Guy.
For the Amazing Mortgage Guy,
Nice.
not all color.
Does it mean I'm old if I remember many of these?
They're legendary, right? And sometimes you can recycle. I did another version of the How to Spot a Mortgage Guy, which was for construction loans. How to spot a guy that'll help with construction loans. Just to put a little twist on it a few years later, and that was well received. And there was another campaign which
I was going to say, what's that block of wood right there?
this, believe it or not, the U.S. Postal Service will let you mail anything if you put a stamp on it, that as long as there's certain amount of room for the label and whatnot. Well, I went out to builder sites and caught a bunch of scraps and threw them in my car, and then I put these in like little envelopes. Because back then, construction loans, not a lot of people did them, and I thought, well, that'll be a niche. I'll just get the word out to builders and realtors that I do construction loans. So I took these down. I had them screen printed with. I was hoping I wouldn't have to hit you with a 2x4, just to let you know we do construction loans.
Oh my gosh!
And we put these in envelopes, and so these people would get them, and they were heavy and they were bulky, and so of course they opened them.
Curious.
Yeah, and then I would go into like a hoity-toity real estate office with mahogany and brass, and there's my cruddy old 2x4 sitting up on the shelf up there. So just things to try and be different.
Yep.
And
finding ways to stand out.
Out in a crowded world where everybody has the best rates, because you can't say best. But I never advertised the best rates or anything like that. Sometimes I would put rates on there, but it was never like we're the lowest. It was just, hey, here's kind of what a snapshot looks like right now. So
fantastic. That is great stuff.
Good way to stay in front of people.
We all recognize that there's nothing new under the sun, and we all do what we do because somebody either taught us or showed us, or we just witnessed people doing other things. And you described to me one of the things you used to do is go just meet with other loan officers who were doing it well, doing it right, or somebody that you had regard for some reason. You talked about going to visit Matt Ellerding one time and some things you gleaned from him. That mindset of learning from other people eventually led to the formation of a little group that you put together back at the First Horizon days.
Yeah.
And I think I was around for one of the first few meetings of that. And you called it the 80-20 Club. Talk a little bit about the 80-20 Club. And I'm guessing that was born out of that desire to get competent, capable, smart, talented people together so that they could learn from one another. But share a little bit about the 80-20 Club.
Well, it was started in 2006. So it was an environment kind of like this, where the market was starting to shift. We could see the writing on the wall that the boom times from 2003 on were kind of going away. And I was down at a Todd Duncan event, which I know you guys are familiar, the Sales Mastery event. And a lot of people have a sort of a closed mindset of they don't want to tell you their secrets because they're worried you're going to use them against them.
Sure.
And I probably used to think that way too, because I've been burned by a few people along the way where I just graciously show someone how I was doing something, and the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from a realtor that said, "Hey, your new trainee says they're better than you." And I'm like, "Really?" They were kidding, right? No, they're really serious. I'm like, "Well, I just showed them all my tricks." And so a lot of times people, it was you had to watch out for the backstabbers. And I think by about 2006, I've been doing this 10, 13 years, somewhere in there. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go with an abundance mindset and try to give it away. And if I share with the right people, maybe they'll pay back, and I'll share with them, they'll share with me, it'll be a win-win. So we're down at Palm Desert, and a member sitting at the bar, and I'm talking to a guy from Dallas, a person from Florida, someone else from New Jersey, and I'm telling them about like a movie event that I did where I invited past clients to a movie where I'd bought out the whole theater. Yeah, and again, nothing new, and they're telling me about something else. And I said, you know what, Portland is a big enough town. I think at the time there were 3,000 transactions a month. Well, I can't do all 3,000, and if I did 10% of them, great. But I bet if we got the right group of people in this club, if you want to call it, and the reason we call it the 80-20 Club is the 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle, that 20% of any sales force is going to do probably 80% of the volume. And that was true of the people that were attending this conference. It's true of, it could be in car sales or copiers or whatever. There's always, if there's 10 salespeople, there's 2 that are doing most of the work, or most of the business anyway. Others are probably doing the work, but just not having the success. And so I started reaching out to people I knew in the industry that were doing well, that had good reputations. And we kind of did it more, it was production-based, yes, but it was also character and integrity, and would they share? Some people, you could just tell they weren't going to tell you anything about what they did, and there's others that would. And it really became well received that first year, and it's been going on for 17 years now. I
remember the first meeting. I think it was held at your office in Lake Oswego. And there was some food nibbles and a great group of people. Like Matt Eckert was there, and some people who've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
And what struck me, I was privileged to be invited because I wasn't producing. I was a non-producing district manager, paid on profitability, so I couldn't really produce. And I got to observe this group, and it was from an outsider's perspective. I remember some people telling me, "Oh, great, you got a group of a bunch of big egos," and I thought, "Well, yeah, I guess I can understand how you think that, but what's happening is this real abundance mindset of people coming in and sharing, not just what they're doing from a sales or marketing standpoint or what they're doing to better themselves, but how they're building their teams, how they're compensating their assistant, how they're making it work within their organization to be successful. It was really cool to see the mindset of these super successful people all sharing.
It was, and there were some that were workaholics, and we've all done it. I was guilty of doing that in the early years, because it was like, well, geez, if I work 5 days a week, I'll earn X, so let's work Saturday. Well, heck, let's work half a Sunday, and pretty soon you're abandoning your family for the good of what you thought was building your retirement and the savings account and things like that. And so it was nice to be able to share that with other people in the group, like, well, what are you doing to find balance? And I think that's about where I started adopting this new mindset of taking a vacation a month. And it was like, you know what, if I have a vacation a month, and it could be just a 3-day trip to Central Oregon or the beach, doesn't have to be Tahiti
Elaborate,
or something, really expensive, but it's just a way to unplug and forget about work for a couple days. Number one, it'll give me something to look forward to if I'm doing that at the end of the month. But then when I do it, I'll feel refreshed, because I would see people that worked nonstop and they started getting grumpy and they were just bitter and they weren't having fun anymore. I was like, you need a vacation. and so I started doing it, and it was fantastic what it did for the life balance. And you work hard, but you play hard too. And of course, in our business, especially with the advent of cell phones and email, you'd be on vacation and probably working almost as much, but you're just in a better location to take those calls. And so a lot of times, I wouldn't necessarily put my out of office on the email, because you didn't want to tell anybody that you're in Palm Springs or somewhere fun. But it's worked out well, and I've done it for 20 years now, probably.
Almost as long as I've known you,
Yeah.
So you had the 80/20 Club starts in 06. Market falls completely apart in 08. Was that part of what helped you get through, or was there a freak out moment for you?
Yeah. You know what? It's funny. I look back at some of the numbers in 07 and 08, and those years still went up. And so, if we're talking lessons from last time, I remember some people panicking that the market was changing. And if anything, the 80/20 Club became a support group. And so you could learn from people best practices, what is working. And the thing I would say is, whether your company was going out of business, which some were, or you're merging or whatnot, it's like, you can't probably change your CEO's mind about a merger that's about to happen. But what you can do is work and get more deals, so that when they're going around the room going, okay, Ken, Kirk, Ken's got 10 loans, Kirk has 12, Stu has 2. Well, we're going to take these 2 guys. And Stu, nice knowing you. So if you were busy doing what you should be doing, getting some business, you're probably in a better position. Whether they merge, maybe they merge and you don't like it. Well, now you can take your pipeline and go somewhere else. But if you weren't busy, no one's going to want you with 2 deals, because you were too busy worrying about what might happen. And that's happened many times over the years, when the industry is down, or there's a rumor of, it looks like, remember the 𝗫𝗏 that was around. I was with a company in the early days, the first company I worked for, called Mortgage One, in the year 2000. They did go bankrupt. And if I were to learn anything from that, I didn't want to believe it. I was head in the sand, just working away a little bit, and probably didn't pay enough attention to some of that. And of course, I did get burned when they went bankrupt. Number one, I was doing their advertising, so guess who got stuck with the bill? Because I was the ad agency on record.
Oh, no.
So that hurt. And then the paycheck that I was supposed to get for that month's work, back then they would actually go to escrow and they'd give you the check. Well, there were people in the company that were signing over the checks to themselves and cashing them in. And I would get the checks and turn them back over to the owner and go, here you go. You promise you'll pay me, right? And, oh yeah, you betcha. And they didn't. And so I got, burned twice. One for the advertising money I had to, commit to and pledge to pay on behalf of this company. And then the paychecks that never happened. So there is, you got to kind of have one eye open to what's going on, but at the same time, you just can't stop working in that time. And I think right now in today's market, people are hibernating. They're not going out to open houses. They're not going to events. They're not getting out because their production's down, and maybe they're not feeling as good about what they're doing based on production. Well, everybody's in that same boat right now, and the 80/20 Club really helps to bring that to light. People will say, "Gosh, I've been blank 2 months in a row, going on the third." Like, ooh, really? And they're honest with people, and so you really want to try to help them get something going, but it's human nature.
Some of that hesitation, I think, is a COVID hangover because people got acclimated to not going out and not having to go to networking events and not going to open houses. And while they might have appreciated the business opportunities that came from those events, they kind of liked the fact that they could be in their sweats, sitting at home, working on Zoom with a decent shirt on and a camera showing their face and upper body only. And then once that passed, they really got acclimated to not being connected, and there's a consequence to that.
Yeah, if I could go back and and give back, yes, we did make more money during the COVID years, 20 to 22. If I could give back all the money and get back all the time during COVID, I would in a second.
Yeah.
Really?
Totally. Because it was really hard on me because I'm an extrovert, and not being able to go see people, the whole mask thing, it just rubbed me the wrong way and really put me in a bad place for a couple of years. It was hard on my marriage. It was hard just getting by every day, getting motivated. And I think a lot of people, to your point, Kirk, are still thinking that. My staff comes into work 2, maybe 3 days a week now because they got used to not having to drive. Well, guess what? If you're not coming in, that means the person that is in the office, which is me, is filling the copier, is getting the mail, is answering the UPS guy, all those non-productive things that don't bring in loans. Well, does that hurt you, Mr. Processor or Mrs. Processor? Yeah, and my assistant, great that you don't have to drive in for half an hour and use a gallon of gas. Okay, and they spin it as, well, you're getting more time from me. No, I'm not. If I need something from you and I walk down the hall and I poke my head in your office and ask you, I get an answer like that. If you're at home and I have to instant message you or email you or call you, 9 times out of 10, I don't get an answer that second. It's delayed. And so that's inefficient. And that continues to this day. And I think it's hard for our business. And I know a lot of companies are saying, hey, no more of that. Even if you work for Google, they're like, nope, you're coming in the office now.
Yeah.
And I wish.
The landscape is changing rapidly.
I wish we could do that, but people, and we have good people. I wouldn't say it's this way or the highway, because good luck finding someone to replace them. But if I had my way, they'd be in 5 days a week.
Yeah. I want to shine a giant spotlight on something you said, because I don't even have if I guessed how much money you made in 2020 and 2021, I would probably still be off by like $1 million. So for somebody who did as many loans as you did during that time, made as much money as you did during that time, I just posted on Facebook, money isn't the key to happiness. It buys you a jet ski, as a great comedian once said. But you said you'd give that back to not have to deal with some of those things that came out of that. So it isn't about money. And you've made lots of money. You've made some money. You've talked through the Acura payment that you had to make while living at home. But of all of it, what doesn't matter is how much money you make, as much as the experience that you're having and the relationships that you have.
Yeah, it was just an unprecedented time in terms of that. I mean, I was actually in escrow to downsize my house and build something kind of half the size. And the stock market dropped 25%. All of a sudden, open houses were not allowed. And jumbo loans, which was half my business. Jumbo loans just stopped. They're like, we're not lending anymore. And I'm like, oh boy, maybe this is not a good time to be building a new house. And so I pulled out and did not go through with it. It was like just before the earnest money went hard. I spent some money on inspection and stuff like that. And of course, it was within a month or two that all of a sudden rates start dropping. We're busier than ever. And somebody else ended up buying that place I was going to buy for $100,000 less.
Oh, wow.
And they absolutely knocked it out of the park. And places 2 doors down were selling for 50% more within months of that. And I kicked myself for not going through with it. I probably Could have, but it was one of those ethical questions. Like, if I buy it, I'm buying it owner occupied, but if I buy it knowing that if I can't move there, it was an existing house, I'll just rent it. And then the whole little angel and devil pops up on your shoulder. You can't do that. That's wrong.
I'm the angel in that story.
You're right. And then the devil's like, oh, who's going to know? And I just couldn't do it. And so I pulled out and then let it go. And I, kicked myself that maybe I could have rented it for a while and then owner occupied, but does that cross a line? Mm-hmm. So I didn't. And there've been other things like that you just come to these crossroads and you have to decide what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes it's a personal thing. Do you want to take that risk of being called out on something like that? And people have done it and they the market changed or COVID hit. I didn't know.
The truth with COVID is that market could have gone either way. You could have been proven really prudent in that decision had the market gone the way a lot of us thought it might go as a result of lockdown.
I had no idea it was going to go the way it went. And then, the stock market all of a sudden shoots way up. And I was fortunate enough to have a bunch of money in the right Tesla and Apple that, went through the roof.
Worked out okay.
It did. And I didn't know that, going ahead. And so, but at the time, it just seemed like funny money. It was like, let's see, it's not real until you cash in. And I still haven't cashed in because I'm not old enough yet, but it's all retirement stuff. So you see, you live to make decisions another day, and you just have to hope you make the right decisions. I think that's something as people in our industry, I see people all the time that are making really good money and they go out and buy the Hummer and the Mastercraft and the new house, and it's all financed. Mm-hmm. And then when the market changes, they're selling the Hummer and the motorhome and the Mastercraft
at a loss.
Like 50 cents on the dollar. Yeah. And I never wanted to be that guy ever since, when I had that Acura. One of the first things I did when I got into this business is I got a couple good checks. I paid off the Acura and had no more car payment. And ever since then, it was like, this is kind of a nice way to be, to not have house payments are fine because that's an appreciating asset. But,
and it's a tax benefit.
But a car, I haven't had car payments since I don't know when. Probably back then would have been the last one that I had, when I was like a year or two in the business. And it's like, if you couldn't save up to buy it, maybe you shouldn't buy it. That's just been my...
I don't want to lose.
I want to stay on pandemic for a second because you and I have a different perspective than most people in that we're married to therapists. Mm-hmm. So what was it like going through that, watching her? Because she maintained her practice during that time, right?
Really hard because she was having to do it with Zoom calls, and she's having her clientele is first responders, so police and firemen. So if you remember, there's all these riots, and then and the police are the enemy at this point, and same thing with the firemen. They're coming in full gear, and if you remember, nobody knew that a little mask would do much, so they were like shields and gloves and all this PPE, they called it, personal protection equipment, and someone that fell down the stairs because they didn't want to catch COVID from treating this person for that. So they were having all this stress of, I have to go help this homeless person or this person that fell at a restaurant or whatever, and I might catch COVID. And so they had all this additional stress, and so her business is just going crazy, working harder than ever, and mine the same thing with rates going down too. And but she's having to do it from home, and we're supposed to work from home, but that's not in my mantra. So I was going to the office. I was the only one at the office. It was super lonely. I actually looked forward to when the UPS guy would come and drop off something.
Conversation,
I felt like Will Smith in one of those movies where you had your dog and that was it. Yeah. But it was just super lonely the whole time because people weren't coming in. To be honest, I never did Zoom calls as much as I've done videos quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I just didn't care for the Zoom. I appreciate that you guys have nice, quality microphones here, because the Zoom, to me, it always sounds echoey and tinny, and coming from the ad background where sound, light, and motion was everything, if it didn't sound right, you would redo it. And I would see these, news clips where they got someone on, and they're still doing it because it's cheaper. You don't have to send a cameraman out and pay for the van and all the equipment, but they use, the stock camera and microphone, that whatever you have at your house, and call it good. Well, to me, it doesn't sound good. And so I never did any Zoom call. I think to this day, I bet I've done 6 since
Wow.
2020, and very, very few Zoom.
Well, I was going to say something similar to what you said. It's profoundly fascinating to listen to you talk about. And we both know how successful you've been, and you've been one of the top. You're not 80-20 club. You're a little bit further north than that as far as your production relative to the rest of your compatriots in this market doing this thing. But to say that the money I earned during that boom of 2020, 2021 pales in comparison to the disconnect that occurred with humanity, especially for an extrovert like you, and I think both of us fit into that category as well, that was of greater consequence than the money was of benefit. That's just a powerful statement.
It hurt, and I think friendships were divided, a lot of things, because you didn't wash your hands after that. And I remember making a video to make fun of the pandemic about handshakes. And we had, the guy that was squeezing your hand. It was like, what's the proper way to do a handshake? And people loved it. We had one of the title guys act out a little grabby Gus kind of handshake where he's, the whole body kind of thing, and he goes a little too low. And just to kind of play on that, and people loved it because it was reality. It was like, do you shake anymore?
Right.
Fist
Ball
bump,
and
elbow.
socket. Yeah.
It was like, come on, just hug it out. And the more we learn today, I think a lot of us would say, that might have been blown.
Bit of
But
an
we
overreaction.
Yeah, we didn't know, and we all thought we were going to die if we breathed your air. And for some reason, I wasn't buying it at the time, so I was in disbelief. Where my wife, having dealt with all these first responders, was completely at the opposite end. And so we butted heads during that time because I'm like, and I was trying not to say too much. I was just like keeping my thoughts to myself because you'd get in trouble if you did voice that. But she's like, you don't know what these guys are going through. And I'm like, no, I don't. Tell me. And so she would share some. But I didn't care for those 2 years at all. And there have been other times, you talk about 80-20 club. I am not the highest producing person in the club. There are a couple females in the group that do way more than me, and nor do I aspire to try and top their numbers these days. I mean, I've been at it a long time. I don't need that.
Not driven by the same things as...
No, and I'm happy to just be included in the group and learn from them. But there was a time where I got recruited to Countrywide, and we'll say the name because they're not around, right? But and they gave a decent signing bonus, and I had left First Horizon, which you and I both
remember
worked.
Broke my little heart.
And there were some things that were broken with First Horizon, and I tried to get them to fix them. I'd been there for quite a while and had the ear of a couple upper management people, 𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏 being one of them. And they're like, well, no, I think we're going to stay the course with this. I'm like, okay, well, people were starting to leave because of these broken things. And then finally they got to me, and I went over to Countrywide. Well, it was even more broken. And that's what I would tell people in this market. If you're at a company right now that things aren't, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, chances are there is no place where you're going to get 10 out of 10. Because I go to Countrywide, and it was probably a 5 out of 10. It was horrible of things that were broken. And it was so bad, I had a 1-year clawback on this signing bonus. And at 6 months, I remember reaching out to somebody else that had gone. I said, does it get any better? He goes, oh, no, it's not. And I went 2 more months, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. It's too stressful. We were getting angry phone calls and stuff. I wrote a check back to Countrywide and went back to First Horizon.
Wow.
And people were like, well, why didn't you just stay the extra 4 months and you could have kept all that money? Like, number one, I didn't want the stress. But 2, I didn't want my reputation to be that guy that took the money
And then bailed.
and then ran, because that sticks with you.
Well, not only that, but 4 more months of consequence to your credibility with your customers who are having negative experiences on servicing or whatever the issues were at the time.
I'm like, that little bit of money over the next 10 years or 12 years, I mean, I'll earn it back in folds compared to doing the right thing. And so we all come to those crossroads where you have to realize, okay, this one deal, I could earn a check on it, but is it worth risking my reputation or my career if you do something wrong.
Sure.
And you've seen people that have made the wrong decisions on that aren't in the business anymore because it came back to bite them. So it's one of those things you just get a little wiser as you get older. And I still need to work. I have expensive hobbies, and so I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon. But I still enjoy what I do, so that's good.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come in here. We didn't even get a chance to talk about your experience as a private pilot, which I think is a really cool story, one of those expensive hobbies.
Yeah.
But if somebody wanted to call you up and find out about getting a loan, or wanted to find out about how to become a private pilot, or whatever they might want to chat with Stuart about, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is a fun tagline that I started using years ago that I made into a website. And if you need to think about something, we say you like to stew on that. So it's stew on that, STU, and then on that. Pretty easy, stewonThat.com. You can go there and get an email or a phone number, or just pop by.
And on Instagram, and I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot of great videos out there. So, yeah.
Try to
All
stay
right.
in front.
I've got one more question for you. So I love the picture that you painted of this kid in class having fun, making
clown.
jokes, class clown. If you were to go grab that kid around the same time that kid was making the joke about in English class, if you were to tell him one thing based on everything you've learned over your life since then, if you were to give that kid one piece of advice, what would it be?
One piece. Gosh, some of the best friends people have are some of their high school friends, and to some degree college too, because there's some great memories in college. But I would say keep in touch with all those people best you can, and sometimes you run into them, way down the road in the strangest places. But for a while, high schools are notorious for having a 5-year reunion, 10 reunion. But then if the class president doesn't plan it, they sort of drop off. Maybe you take it upon yourself to have your own little reunion for your people in town, because those are the innocent years, right? You're just doing the best you can, and you might have been the skinny little kid that got slammed in the lockers. But people, and I have some high school friends that have since 20 years later said, I felt really guilty, and I've been carrying around this weight for all these years of something that happened, and they tell you, like, oh my God, I never thought a second about that. But if you stay close with those guys, it would be funny to see today how they've matured, what they feel and think
Who they
of
have
you.
become.
Yeah, and that would be it. And
Spoken like a true extrovert, by the way.
I know, totally.
yeah,
It's funny. I just had my 40th delayed by COVID, so we
Yeah.
were 2 years delayed
For
in actually
high school?
having it. I graduated in '80. It was supposed to be in 2020. And it was
Yeah.
in 2022, and it was well attended and fantastic.
yeah,
Great advice.
Yeah, I love it. Stu, thanks for dropping in, buddy.
Happy to be here.
Appreciate you having you.